and then I will let everyone in a minute. Because I like when they come in and see this. Okay. All right, letting people in. Hi, everyone. We're about to get started. We're just letting a few more people in. Welcome. Don't be worried that something's wrong with your computer. If you're on mute, that is controlled by us, so you are not able to unmute yourself. We hold all the mute power, so we can unmute in a little bit, but for right now, you'll be joining on mute, so don't worry about that. And just gonna admit a few more people. And we'll get started in about 30 seconds. All right, a few more people just coming in, so we're letting everybody in. All right. Oh, people coming in, still coming in. Okay. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. All right, thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Gina Waldhorn. I am the COO of the Sports Innovation Lab. I'm gonna go ahead and say hi to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this second Ask Me Anything. In response to the challenging environment that we are all finding ourselves in today and for the near future, we've decided to set up these AMAs, and this is quickly turning into a series of AMAs, in order to create a conversation and foster discussion that we hope will lead to ideation, strategizing, and opportunities for the sports industry so that all of us can start to adapt and push forward through what really is uncharted territory for us. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to briefly introduce our AMA host, Josh Walker, and today's guest, Dan Cohen. And then I'm going to go over a quick few rules of engagement on how to participate in the Ask Me Anything. And then we'll get started. So Josh Walker is co-founder and president of the Sports Innovation Lab, where he leads a roster of over 60 clients in the sports industry on how to create breakthrough fan experiences for their business, as well as prepare their business for the fan of the future, something we call the fluid fan. Before starting Sports Innovation Lab, Josh was vice president of research at Forrester. He was responsible for launching a tool I think many of you are familiar with called The Wave, all based on an evaluation of innovation framework. And Josh has really, over the past many years, been a serial entrepreneur himself. So taking his passion for technology and data to launch and grow several venture-backed companies, many of which were in the sports industry. So Josh, thank you for making this happen today. And today, Josh is going to be speaking with Daniel Cohen. Daniel is a recipient of Sports Business Journal's 40 Under 40. He's received Sports Pro Media's 10 Next Leaders in Sport and Fast Company's Most Innovative Companies in Sports. And he leads Octagon's global media rights consulting business. This practice consults leagues, federations, teams, broadcasters, digital media platforms, telco, lots of different tech companies, as well as the investment side, such as VCs and private equity, regarding valuation, strategy, and negotiations. He's really a recognized executive in the industry, and he has a passion for building business at the cross section of sports, media, and technology. So we're thrilled to hear his point of view today and ask a lot of tough questions. So right before we really jump in, a few rules of engagement on how this is all going to work. One moment. So, as I mentioned, right now, you guys are all on mute. And that is how we're going to be continuing the session. We would like you to ask questions through the chat window. I'm going to show you how to expand that chat window if you're not seeing it right now. And a quick note, this is being recorded. We've had a lot of requests to watch these after we're complete. So I will be following up with all the participants to send you guys a link to watch this following the AMA. And it's an AMA, so ask anything, nothing's off the table. So you should be seeing this on your screen right now. In order to enable the chat window to ask questions, see at the bottom bar, you will recognize a little chat icon where it says chat. Go ahead and click on that chat icon and you will expand a chat window on the right side of your screen. At the bottom of that chat window, you can see a little area where you can type. You can choose to send your AMA questions directly just to the host or post them publicly, and we encourage you to post them publicly. We love seeing what what questions are being asked. And once you submit those, you'll see your question pop up in the top of the chat screen. So pretty simple. That's how we're going to run things. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Josh.
All right. You guys hear me? Excellent. Thank you guys for joining. This is another AMA, which we think is important to give you guys a chance to stop focusing on the negative and start thinking about what we can do next. And I think that's a very important thing. So I am very proud of all of you guys taking time out of your day to give your brains a bit of an exercise here. Hopefully we can stay positive and think about what's happening in our industry and where we go from here. I asked Dan to join me because in the last AMA, a lot of the questions were about what's happening now that games are being postponed, leagues are delaying their schedules, and how is this condensed media environment going to change the way advertisers, sponsors, media rights, leagues collect revenue, but also operate their businesses going forward. So Dan's here because he's one of those people that's on one of our leadership boards around immersive media who thinks about this quite a bit. I think it's a really great opportunity for you guys to ask him anything you'd like. But before we get started, what I'd love for Dan to do is really give us an anatomy of what a media rights deal looks like. So Dan, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Josh.
Awesome. So what I'd like you to do, Dan, just because not everybody gets the same level of access and visibility you do to some of these larger deals, can you give everybody on the call sort of a sense of what considerations go into a media rights deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're definitely changing nowadays, right? With digital streaming platforms and rights being carved up in so many different ways. To give you an example of that, the NFL currently has carved up 22 different packages of its rights. But you've got 4 main components that go into every traditional media rights deal. Number 1, you've got a definition of the set of rights. Are we talking linear rights? Are we talking digital streaming rights in terms of audio visual? What sort of territories are we assigning these rights to? Are we talking radio rights? Are we talking betting and data rights? So a definition of the platform, the territory, and the type of rights. Then you go into the scheduling and the packaging piece. So how many rights are you acquiring if you are a platform or a network? Are you getting a game a week? Are you getting half a season? That's another big part of it. The term is also always in there, right? That's part of any deal. But that looks like what are we talking about? 3-year deal, 5-year deal, back-end right discussions around what are those renewal options and triggers. And then the fourth part that's always important in there is the fee structure. Right? So how much are we getting paid? How are we getting paid? Are we having, revenue shares, minimum guarantees, off the revenue share? Is it off of advertising, subscribers? It can get pretty complex.
So in this environment, when people are, justifiably very anxious about what's happening, a few of those things don't really play into this immediately. What plays into it is more of like the term won't change, the triggers won't change, but the triggers may or may not be put into effect because of the amount of games that are being played. But what somebody bought is already pretty much set at the outset of the season.
Well, I would agree with you up until about 2 weeks ago. So we're getting calls from a lot of our clients on the property side who are getting asked about what sort of flexibility do their broadcast partners have with regards to the term of their contract. So what we're finding is becoming increasingly important to understand is where in the term of your deal with your broadcast partner are you? The folks that are closer to expiry are actually having more advantageous conversations than those that might have just entered into one. So for example, if you are Major League Baseball and you are a year away from your ESPN and Turner renewals, there's a lot more flexibility you can do around an extension negotiation than, say, with the NBA, who still has another 4 or 5 years left on its deals with Turner and ESPN. So the term gets dissected a little bit more in this environment, given where they are in relation to expiry.
And I know that you talk to a number of the same people I do. I'm interested in your perspective on where people's heads are. You know, my last 2 weeks have been a lot of calls with leaders and of different technology organizations, properties, media companies, and they're all still gathering information. Are you finding that your clients or people that are reaching out to you are in the mode of starting to think about doing something now? Or
No, I think you're right. I would agree with what you said, Josh. Everyone is still head down, twofold. Head down on reviewing contractual language and defining and getting first, second, and third iteration understanding of what that all means. And I think the second part is, truthfully, honestly, whether it be Adam Silver or Rob Manfred, everybody still thinks that games are going to be played pretty soon. And there's a high level of confidence that we will get past this period relatively quickly, and that the majority of the season that is left to be played or needs to be started will still get played. So there's still a high level of confidence around that.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think that there's a lot of processing going on, but I still think that people are very much the when, not if mindset. So I agree that there's an underlying sense that this is going to get taken care of, which is nice to hear. I'm not sure, you know, how true that is. So let me get the audience involved right now, right off the bat, so we can get some not only questions in the hopper, but get you guys thinking about this. One thing that I wanted to understand from all of you is, you know, we see a lot of reactionary stuff happening now across ESPN and some of the broadcasters, media companies that are trying to do different things to fill the air that would normally be filled with, you know, programs that were going to be filled with live sports. So this question is really, how surprised are you that there wasn't a backup plan or a contingency plan in place? And this will very much lead to a question for you, Dan, which is, why wasn't there? And is it hard legally for there to be enough agility in these rights deals for broadcasters or media companies to do things quickly? So I'm going to we have almost 100 people on here, so I'm going to just let them weigh in. You guys have another maybe 15, 20 seconds, and then I'm going to shut you off. All right, 10 more seconds. You guys want to weigh in? All right, I'm going to close this up and share it with you guys. So the overwhelming response is that you guys are not that surprised, but a few of you are still surprised that there wasn't an opportunity or a plan in place to handle a situation like this. Dan, specifically, why is it hard for media companies to have flexibility around rights? And why is it hard for people to get access to archived content or replay classic games or do any of that stuff that might be a real short-term fix here?
Yeah, sure. I'm a little surprised, Josh, at the 20% that are surprised. The fundamental infrastructure built around ESPN is live sports programming, right? And so there's not a ton of flexibility or backup planning when you've got 200 plus hours of programming a day that ESPN programs across 9 of its channels. It is, from a calendar perspective, it is very difficult for sports to be flexible. And from a programming perspective, when your whole business, whether it be NBC Sports Network, Fox Sports 1, ESPN, when it's all built around live sport, there's not a ton that you can do. Now, on the flip side of that, and the positive side, is you're starting to see a trickle of reaction from getting live content onto the platform. So I'll get to the highlights and archive point you made, Josh, but you're starting to now see esports becoming more of a topic of conversation. Luka Doncic the other night, went off NBA 2K League, and you see an RSN locally in LA start to broadcast some of that content. The second piece there that I think is important to talk about is the advancement of technology has put us in such a place where live is so much more possible. Live from the living room, what we're doing today. There's no reason that instead of listening to Daniel Cohen and Josh Walker and go back and forth and banter over the state of media rights, that we can't tune into Steven Strasburg and Max Scherzer and Trey Turner talking all about what it was to win the World Series and actually lay over commentary and social cast that, be it through MLB Network or be it through Twitch or both. So
let's stop there, because that's the thing that I go right to, right? And then let's answer some of these questions, because there's some really good ones that have come in, Gina. Right on that point, why can't, or what prevents me as an athlete from grabbing like a game that I had a killer game in and just start streaming it with, Twitch and OBS and all the technology they provide me with, and getting my buddies together and just talking smack about the game? Like, is there anything that really just shuts me down right away if I start trying to do that?
Well, it's a little bit like whack-a-mole. They're not going to be able to shut down a live Facebook stream of a game.
Well, who would care the most in that situation? Because baseball cares. Baseball loves the idea that my athletes are out there, they're ambassadors, they're keeping my fans engaged. This is a crazy period of time. Who's going to care the most that if, somebody starts doing that?
So the leagues, the major, say, core 5-6 leagues in the U.S., traditionally they hold back those rights to archive rights. And they protect that and they own that. That's why this is where I am a little surprised. Why MLB Network hasn't started, or NBA TV hasn't started to do a little bit more of what you're talking about, getting LeBron to talk about his 10 best dunks and replay them, but do it in a more official way.
Have you ever seen a rights release happen in mass like this? Like where they're just like, look, this is a really weird period of time. Like, for this next 2 weeks, we're making all this available.
Yeah, I think it's tough, Josh, to do that. It's a $24+ billion industry in the U.S. So while I'm all for, serve the fans and make sure that they're being fed, I think we have to do it in a very careful way so as not to set precedent. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's being concerned right now.
We had a question come in on this topic, so I'll just toss it in while we're on this point of how do you recommend athletes, teams, and leagues create branded content during a crisis, a pandemic like this, without coming off pushy and, maintaining the right balance of sensitivity during this time? Any advice or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really think that it takes bringing together the leagues, the broadcast networks, digital platforms, and the players' unions. And I think if they can get together pretty quickly, it's an easy solve. Why not do exactly what you did for the NBA All-Star Game, where you name 2 team captains who then live broadcast who they're going to pick for their team, and then assign each of them a window in which they will be live whatever, live commentating over some historical archive footage, live playing NBA 2K League and create a tournament style play. There's a lot that create a talking head show, back and forth, banter. I mean, there's so much. If you think about the talent, that athlete, the athlete talent combination, these athletes are no longer just on the court superstars. They are off the court movers of culture and film and fashion and food and art. There's so much that they can do. While Aisha Curry has her own cookbook, get Steph in the kitchen and launch the Food Network with players. There's so much you can do. Again, we talked about the live streaming capacity now through 5G, encoders getting better. There's so much more bandwidth that can be streamed. And these athletes themselves can, in many ways, have already become platforms unto themselves. And I think that's where these leagues and broadcast networks need to recognize that if we come together, we can pull a slate of programming, be it 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day, and fill in live content.
It's really interesting. Jack Barlow, who's on our team, and you can see his pretty face right there. I've asked him to keep track of what the athletes are doing. And so he's created a Google Doc that I can stay on top of. Jack, can you quickly share? I'm going to unmute you. I think I can unmute you. Yeah, you're unmuted. Oh, there you're unmuted. Can you share the differences between the NHL and the NBA? Because it's underlying cultural stuff that I think is indicative of how those athletes represent their leagues.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel was touching on it earlier, talking about Luka Doncic on Twitch streaming games. You had Bradley Beal, a member of the Wizards, asking his Twitter followers who wants to play FIFA, the new Call of Duty game. So a lot of the NBA players are still promoting their own brand and kind of using their own channels, where you see the NHL players, they often use we in interviews. It's always about the team. It's about a collective culture there. And they've been putting out videos on Twitter, even on their own channels, but also their team channels, saying, we all want to be back in the arena. We miss our fans. We want to be out there playing for you guys again. But, we've actually been enjoying the family time during the 82 game season. They're always on the road. You don't get a lot of time to be with your family. So they've been stepping back, kind of enjoying that family time. So it's interesting to me to see how players from the NHL is often seen as a team and a we league, kind of focusing on family time, kind of stepping back from promoting themselves, when the NBA, as you said earlier, they're all about moving culture, music. You see Lonzo Ball on his Instagram story putting out his new rap music. So it's really kind of a twofold side of things, but it's been fun to follow for sure.
Yeah, and you can share that document on our Slack channel, right? Like, I think that would be a really helpful thing for people to see. The reactions are very different across the different leagues. So that's certainly one thing we're paying close attention to. Dan, on the questions coming in side of things, a tough one from Ishwara, you can dodge it or, dance around it however you see fit. But will media rights holders attempt to claw back media fees from leagues in the event that games are missed? Will the media entities be successful if they attempt that strategy?
I think you have to be really careful around how you go about this. As I mentioned before, nearly a $50 billion industry globally, 24 billion plus in the US. The ecosystem is set up in such a way where properties need the banks, they need the broadcasters, and broadcasters, especially in this day and age, with the incredible pressure that they're under from pay TV erosion, changes in consumer behavior, they need live sport, right? Live sport, 48 of the top 50 broadcasts last year on TV were live sport. So they absolutely need it to survive. I haven't heard from a single client, and we represent some of the biggest leagues in the world. I haven't heard from a single client that a broadcaster has approached them yet about clawbacks. Now, part of that is because everyone is still acting under the assumption we're going to get a lot of games in. But in the case that it's not, I think cooler heads prevail here. And I think that leaving the lawyers aside, these are not going to court, too important for both properties and broadcast networks to not come together and find solutions. What are some of those solutions? Well, that's what we're currently advising some of our clients. How can we get creative besides the typical pro rata type of approach, right? There is a cost per game model that can be built pretty easily. But aside from that, are we talking about extending terms? Are we talking about other make goods in the form of maybe more access across a different set of rights that you were restricted by, perhaps digital, perhaps betting? There's a lot of different ways that leagues will work with, and I know that because we are working through that with them. Leagues will work with their broadcast partners to ensure that this relationship moves forward because it's symbiotic and it needs to survive.
Do you want to be unmuted there, Shwara? You can just do one of these. Yeah, no, you're good. She was satisfied with your answer, Dan.
Shwara, sorry about the A10 tickets.
That's an inside joke, apparently. Okay, before this AMA, we talked a little bit about what I think is important to cover too. When you have an event like March Madness, and there's so much money tied up in how that funding and how those advertisers like support college sports and things of that nature, what do you think is happening with that tournament in particular and big events that are singular, not season type of media properties?
So I think that you hit it. That's a tough one. That's going to be a very difficult one to swallow from the NCAA's perspective because you can't just replay it, right? And you're talking about a lot of money at stake with regards to more so the advertising side from an immediate impact. They will resolve. Listen, they go out till 2032, the NCAA with Turner and CBS. They're going to figure out the rights fee allocation and right amount to resolve that conflict. The near term and medium term impact of losing what we approximate to be a little less than $1 billion of national ad sales between CBS and Turner for this past year, that's going to be tough. And I think with regards to how do you help your broadcast partners to recover some of that loss has to come around additional content, maybe term extension, different sets of rights, et cetera.
So that's the situation with the NCAA in like 30 seconds. There's another whole other area that's unfolding around local. When people think about broadcast, it's important to remember that there's national broadcasters and then there's regional broadcasters. And a lot of the stations that you guys watch at home, if you're watching local news, are those local regional broadcasters. And it was already in the news with Sinclair and YouTube TV and a bunch of the negotiations that were going around the Fox sports content. What's going to happen now in the scope of what's happening with that deal?
Yeah, I think that is something to keep an eye on. With our team clients and contacts, we've been getting a lot of questions around the affiliate negotiation impact. So an example of that would be, as you mentioned, right, Sinclair comes in for about $10 billion. They acquire Fox's RSNs, and now they're stuck in a place where they don't have any live content. And furthermore, we'll look at a specific example like the Marquee Network. So the Chicago Cubs and the Ricketts family decide they're going to move forward and a la the Yankees and the Mets. They're going to launch their own network and in partnership with Sinclair. Before the season can even begin, they're having contract stalls with Comcast, a major MVPD provider in the Chicago market, and they're at an impasse. So how does this materially impact Chicago Cubs fans around the Chicago DMA of getting this content? And from a Comcast subscriber, it absolutely will have an impact in the short term. And the other piece is with just the ink not even being dry on all of these other affiliate deals, there's a per subscriber model that they've built based on a minimum delivery of content requirement. And so if that minimum delivery of content requirement is not hit, that threshold, then there are clawback provisions that those MVPDs will have And how does that impact, again, all of this before this channel can even launch? There's gonna be some tough conversations in that market.
And I've seen you and William on social talking about the, direct to consumer subscription model in this environment as well. There's been, and you've used these words, there's been a gold rush of like buying programming, developing out those niche channels, NBC Gold, ESPN Plus. What happens to those properties and those new product efforts in this environment?
Yeah, Josh, I think you hit on kind of the fourth pillar of questions that we're getting from clients and broadcasters alike, right? You covered media rights, you covered the advertising market, covered the RSN affiliate side of things. But the last, one of the last big pockets to discuss is there has been this gold rush to go out and acquire differentiating content in a very competitive, quick to market launch for all these direct to consumer products, ESPN Plus, DAZN, et cetera, right? Well, they're all built off the differentiation of live content. ESPN Plus goes out and buys Bundesliga $30 million a year, nearly 4x of what Fox was paying, right? These are major investments. PGA Tour, the deal they just did with ESPN Plus to try and differentiate that product and get ahead of the DAZNs and the gold passes, et cetera. So what do you do now about churn? And I think this creates a really awesome opportunity for these newer digital direct-to-consumer products to build trust in a relatively new subscriber base and be pumping them full of really interesting differentiating content. What we've seen so far is really lazy. We've seen Sky in the UK and we've seen others just lower prices. 11 Sports Network in Portugal. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to help you with your, your metrics that many of these digital direct-to-consumers guide by, whether it be average revenue per user or a lifetime value of a subscriber. You need to find new and meaningful ways to deliver new and meaningful creative content to keep them there, aside from just saying, we'll pause your $5 a month. Because the other thing you have to think about is we're just at the forefront of this. If in fact we are in a recession or we're headed into a recession, the first thing that's going to get hit is all that discretionary wallet spend. So when I'm looking at my cable bill or I'm looking at my ESPN Plus bill, those are going to be the first pieces to really get hit the hardest. So now, this week, next week, the week after, these are the most important days for these products to come up with a content strategy, aside from just the financial piece, to create that stickiness, that good faith, and keep folks engaged.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you and William more that lowering prices is lazy. Maybe it's a good time to see what everybody else thinks. Maybe we didn't give you guys all the options you want with this question, but certainly lowering prices is not the right thing to do, so we didn't add it to the mix. But what do you think is the right approach right now for media companies? Are they going to try to do alternate programming, leverage user-generated content, engage fans in all other sorts of formats? There's been some talk about ESPN and some of those broadcasters who have produced documentary shows, maybe releasing them early in an unedited state just to get people hyped up about those things. And then Dan and I touched on it earlier in the call. Why can't they get access to those archives, and why aren't they doing more with those archives? So I'll let you guys all weigh in on this, and we'll pick back up in about 10 seconds. All right, 10 more seconds. Get your votes in. Ending now. All right, so here's where you guys wound up. Certainly none of you want to see anything other than sports because you're all right in the head. That's the right answer for sure. Dan, what do you think about the use of social media? Have you seen anything that, besides some of the stuff we already referenced, have you seen any of the media companies doing a better job embracing TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, Twitter, to do anything in the last 2 weeks?
I have, and it's really just more about an awareness campaign, which is a good first step, right? ESPN coming out day by day on Twitter, on Facebook, releasing what the next day's programming is going to be. Doesn't take a genius to know today is all going to be about Tom Brady. Sorry, Josh. But I think that where they have to lean in next is around that new content format. So for the folks that talked about creating new content and social media content, Pete Alonso yesterday said, if I get 50,000 likes, I'm going to challenge some of my fellow Major League Baseball players to some esports content. We're going to figure out a way to blast that out there. That needs to get picked up by MLB Network at minimum to serve both their core fan base and the general MLB public that in a couple of weeks we're looking forward to watching opening day. That's what's got to happen next. And I think they're moving in that direction, albeit a little bit slower for our client liking.
And I know neither of us have a crystal ball, but is there something about the way that the schedules are set up, or that the dynamics between, some of the larger entities give you a sense of which properties would come back online first? Or is it much more government? They're the ones dictating this. Everybody else is just following their lead at this point.
Oh, I think it's two different questions. It's which sports afford themselves by the very nature of their DNA and makeup to come back online sooner. And then the second question is who really makes that call.
So let's take the first one, because I was just on with one of our clients this morning. We were talking about how they could test a number of athletes, have no fans in the venue, get a mission critical production staff, and make it look like a real, normal game in an environment that could continue the season. And they're just frustrated that even though they could do that and screen everybody and do it in a safe way, that the right posture right now to communicate to everybody how serious this issue is to shut things down. And I totally get that from a communication strategy, from a PR strategy, but it does seem that certain sports could screen the right people, bring them in, and still serve as a distraction and a welcome form of entertainment for a public that's just scared out of their minds right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with the first part of what you were saying, which is it is the right call right now to shut everything down. Looking out my window right now, I still see about 20, 30 people on the block just walking around. Like, the message needs to get out that this is a very serious issue, a condition that's sweeping the world, and having, 10 different folks tested so they can play 5-on-5. It doesn't feel like that's probably the right move right now. All the backlash about how all the NBA players are getting COVID tested ahead of, say, medical trainees and even physicians in hospitals, not a good look. So I would stay clear of anything coming back online in the short term. That said, I think if you look at the sports that are the least physical in nature, where maybe there's the most space between athletes, those make the most sense that they would come back online first, perhaps to play in front of an empty arena or a stadium. So I think of baseball, clearly there's a lot of distance between athletes there. You think of things even alternative sports like bowling, right? It's pretty much a 2-on-2 there, and you don't, unless you're Pete Weber and you need the crowd, you can film that without an audience. So I think you have to think about things like that. Tennis is another great one. Where is there more distance between the athletes? Those will probably be the ones that I would suggest come online first.
So we've been spending a lot of time talking about the short term. How do you think this is going to affect negotiations in the long term? Do you expect to see new clauses in your contracts that are very different than ones you've seen in the past?
100%. Yeah, I don't see how we wouldn't protect against this. I mean, everyone on this call, I'm sure, has read ad nauseum about force majeure, and that is the legal term that's getting thrown around everywhere. The simple way to understand it for someone who's not a lawyer is when there's an act out of anyone's control and you cannot contractually fulfill the obligation, then you have a way out of that contract. Now, every contract is different. Every contract I've ever reviewed on a media rights agreement defines force majeure differently. And that when we talk about leagues are going through these contracts as well as broadcasters, that's really where their focus is right now. But I think you're going to see a lot more of a descriptive tone around force majeure. I think you're also going to see a lot of definitions and new definitions around what a make good can and cannot be. And I think the third part where we're really excited to be involved in is around the valuation of game, live game and delay game assets. So when you do run into an issue like we do have today, then you have a prescribed amount of clawback or make good that's already defined, and you're not necessarily tussling over what that CPVH value could be or what that cost per game could be. Those are the three buckets I think we're gonna see a lot more prescription put into.
Do you guys currently at Octagon do a lot of work on evaluating archive, like providing valuation services for archive footage?
No, candidly, not too much. I think we would lump that into an add-on in terms of a rights agreement. Our focus around rights valuations that are non-live have really risen in the past 16 months around the highlight clips. That's where we have seen a tremendous growth in value, where there's a lot of arbitrage going on right now. They're so undervalued on the whole, and they're becoming, in many formats and many platforms, they're becoming more important than the live rights.
Yeah, Major League Baseball just launched this killer search engine that I'm all about. I keep talking about it, so I apologize if you guys have heard me do it before, but it's like 7-second clips of all the coolest plays you've ever seen. And the problem is it's ad supported. So you have to watch like a 15-second ad to watch a 7-second highlight. But those are the things that as a fan, I just want to get my hands on and play with and make mashups of and do cool stuff with. And it would really be valuable to know that there was a pool of that stuff that was accessible to the consumer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the technology's there, right? I mean, there's many companies that allow for automated cutting and clipping and social sharing. And, you know, I know you guys talk a lot about WSC technologies. They're great. They partner with the NBA as kind of a lead-in. Now they're off and running. But there's a lot of companies that kind of empower the fan to take these near-time live rights or post-game highlights and share them around.
And you're more of a student of this than I am. Does this represent any other period of time in sports that you can look back and go, oh, there's a corollary to what we're experiencing?
It's that the answer to that question is changing every week. If you had asked me that last week, we were running a lot of analysis internally of what did it look like, what did sports viewership look like after the financial crisis, right in 2008. And to be honest with you, it didn't look too bad. This is unprecedented because at least there were live sports still going on at that point. Mm-hmm. Now that we just see cancellation, suspension, one after the other, and a complete disappearance of live sport, there really is nothing to compare it to.
Yeah. Gina, do you have anything else on the live feed?
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, what impact will this have on fans' willingness to attend live sports and entertainment events in the future? How concerned do you think the leagues are about losing a percentage of fans and ticket sales for future seasons?
Is that to me?
Yeah, it's a little outside of your ballpark, but why don't you take a swing at it? I addressed a little bit of that on the first AMA. I mean, my sense, Dan, just to give you a little bit of a softball on this, is like that you and I are in no position to really kind of figure out exactly how this is going to play out. When we look at attendance numbers, there are some very clear indications that people started getting scared of being in large groups leading up to this. So you could see the degradation of attendance leading up to this. So people kind of started to already feel unsafe in large crowds. I think it's going to come back very slowly, and then it's going to be fine. I think human psychology works like that. I've been through 9/11. I've been through the housing crisis. I think there'll be that sort of period of time where things happen slowly and then it happens quickly. And I think that the stadiums are going to have to do things that are going to screen for health of attendees so that people feel safe. So this it's not a media's rights question as much as it is like, what's your finger on the pulse of the industry? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at if we narrow the scope of the question to at-home viewership, once these sports come back on, if sport beats out the traditional, say, corporate America mandate to work from home right now, and that I can be home at 1 o'clock and tune into a Yankees Red Sox game, you're going to see viewership through the roof, because everyone is just the hunger is only building as each day goes by for sports fans to consume this type of content. And I think where 2 years ago, there was a little criticism around Facebook and YouTube getting a package of rights from MLB and streaming them, and they're just kind of a random Wednesday in the middle of the week. There was a little criticism around Amazon and the package games that they'll be getting this season through the Yes Network. But now you're saying, oh, shoot, you know what? That 1 o'clock Wednesday match while everybody is home and working is incredibly valuable. So I think from a viewership perspective, as sports come back online,
that's really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. You're like, you got different day parts that increase in value.
Absolutely. Those were for better or for worse, the throwaway games. How can we take a package of rights that really don't do too well and throw them up on Facebook and test the product and everything else? But now it's, well, if everyone's working from home, you'll see millions. If it's a nationally broadcast game, you will see millions upon millions of concurrent streams for that.
I know this is not the most agile organization, but they've been pretty aggressive. You've been doing a ton of work with women's soccer. Like, can they take advantage of this period of time to put more stuff out?
Yeah, I think they absolutely can. And they're a client of ours. We had a conversation with them this morning just around their content strategy. And Lisa,
what assets are in play? Like what do they have control over that they can play with?
So they have control over their archive rights. They have control over, well, I wouldn't say they have control, but they have partnership with their players. They also, they have control over a group of individuals, executives, owners, and Lisa Baird and her team, Lisa Baird being the new commissioner, where putting up, whether it be through the partnership with Twitch now or whether it be on another social platform, many of these women are women leaders in sport that would garner thousands, if not tens of thousands of viewers asking about the league and how do you run it and how do you decide this and what's going on with U.S. soccer. Doing an AMA with Lisa Baird would be incredibly powerful right now. So I think whereas maybe it's not as interesting to talk to the head of blank at a blank NBA or MLB team, but talking to the brand new commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, not just about the NWSL, but the game of soccer, but about women in sport. I think that's really interesting. So it's player content, it's archive content. Also, certainly they can go out and partner with some of their athletes, whether it be Megan Rapinoe or Heather O'Reilly. They can go out and start to do some tutorials and training video, right? No different than what we talked about before. Work in partnership with the Players Union. The NWSL has one. Work in partnership to come together and all of that, food, film, fashion, art, culture. You can create 24/7 programming, mostly live, West Coast, East Coast, where these players are stationed, and really start to pump full of that content platform in their new partnership with Twitch.
Do you have a sense or recommendation for the brands that are largely title sponsors or big, presence at these live events, what they should be doing? How are you guys thinking about advising them? I know it's very early for them to be thinking about this, but if you're a Major League Baseball top sponsor, what are you going to be doing in the next few weeks?
So I would actually punt on this question. I see that Arnold Wright from Octagon is tuned in, and he is not expecting that I'm going to throw this over to him. But Arnold is one of the EVPs at Octagon who runs many of our most important client partnerships, brand partnerships, and helping them navigate that. Arnold, I don't know if you want to chime in on that.
You can unmute him, Gina. I got him. I can see him.
For some reason, I don't think he
Yeah,
has.
Ernie's the only one who's like,
Yeah.
you can't unmute. We can pretty much unmute anybody. I think he might have done that defensively. Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, he might have known.
Coming.
Yeah. We'll have to
Can we
punt
just
on
unmute ourselves?
There we go.
Arnie.
No, this is Jeff, but I'm just letting you know that we can all unmute ourselves.
Oh,
Oh, well, that's
Wow.
a power we tried not to give you, Jeff.
Well, listen, I am Dan's biggest fan, so maybe he did it in the background.
I really didn't think we were going to get through this AMA without hearing your voice. All right.
And I love to hear all of your voices.
Well, thanks for joining, Jeff. All right, let's do this. Gina, do you have any other questions? Because we're getting to the top of the hour, and I want to make sure, Dan, you can summarize and wrap up any way that you feel is appropriate. So do you have one more question maybe? And
yeah.
then we'll let Dan.
One more from the audience that we saw a couple come in that were very similar are what kind of lasting optimizations that may change the more traditional aspects of the industry do you think we're going to see? And you know, as a whole, following and coming out of the COVID-19 crisis, do you think they'll be able to capitalize on those changes and be at the forefront of progress? So really just a future outlook for how this might change the industry and optimize the industry.
Yeah, I think the number one place to start is around the technology piece. And when I refer to technology, it can be on front end or back end of how content gets delivered to the home. You're seeing such an uptick in streaming, whether it be streaming of Netflix or Spotify, but you're seeing such an increase. So that could be 5G, it could be work on different types of encoders and codecs that are being developed to enhance a stream or handle more concurrence. I think you're going to see e-commerce with all of us trying to continuously click on when we can get our next Amazon delivery sent to us. So that is an area where I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of optimization. I also think you're going to see much greater partnership, or we hope to see that you're going to see much greater partnership between athlete, broadcaster, and the league to help generate content together and not in vacuums where only if you follow this specific athlete may you be exposed to it.
So Dan, with that, do you have any last, sort of summary words before we tie everything up here?
No, listen, we're going to get through this, and sports will be played again, and they'll be played with even more vigor, and networks will get past this. And as I mentioned before, the relationship that is so critical between both properties and networks will remain. And in the meantime, just take care of yourselves, wash your hands, and tune into whatever live content that you can find. Even as I watched this morning, 2 guys play outside their window in Italy paddleball.
Yeah. Look, I think if you guys have followed me on LinkedIn, I've been pretty consistent on this message, which is that in this time, leaders are going to really step up. And so I can't thank Dan enough for joining us and lending his voice to this conversation. And I also want to thank you guys for doing the other thing that I continue to recommend, which is staying engaged, being proactive, learning during this period of time, because you have to keep your brains energized. You have to be very active so that you can stay focused on what's good and positive in the world. We have created a number of resources that I'm gonna let Gina walk you guys through very quickly. If you wanna continue to stay engaged with us, we're gonna do more of these AMAs, and we're gonna ask more people to join us that can help us give shape to some of the other issues that are gonna arise because of this crisis. And if you have any recommendations on who those people are, please let us know. But Dan, I appreciate you joining, and as always, man, it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, Josh, Gina, and the whole crew, this is awesome. This is exactly what our industry needs. We need to stay connected and have really interesting conversations. Thank you so much for putting it together.
Of course. Gina?
Awesome. And for everyone who wants to continue the conversation with the team at Sports Innovation Lab, with Dan, with Josh, and a lot of you already are part of this community, we have a Slack channel that we started in response to what's happening in the world today. So please come join. This is a place to share resources for job postings, for advice, for free tools, technology vendors. It's a growing community. It's very active. It's something you can check all day or a few times a day. And we've been seeing a lot of value produced through this community. So it's free to join. Please come join us and join the conversation there. Also, we are working on a live dashboard. We mentioned Jack is tracking athlete responses, but we're also tracking league and team responses of cancellations, postponements, and a lot of really interesting data. So when we go ahead and follow up with an email to all of you that will include a recording of this session, we'll also follow up with a link to that dashboard. You could also get it on our Slack channel. So if you liked this, let us know, and we'll keep them coming and we'll do more. We'll also love to hear who you'd like to hear from. So if you have any recommendations for guests you'd like to hear on these AMAs, please let us know. So thanks everyone. And again, stay safe.
Take care of each other. See you guys.